And finally, in Africa, a Chinese supermarket has been accused of racism against locals in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Nigerians were outraged after they were denied entry inside the store for not being of Chinese descent. The West African nation's consumer watchdog has now shut down the Chinese market and summoned its owner. Our next report goes into detail.
Not a day goes by when China and its behavior don't make the news. This time, Chinese actions have sparked outrage almost 10,000 kilometers away. Residents in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, are enraged with the way they've been treated. A Chinese supermarket in Nigeria is at the center of controversy. The shop is located in a building run by the Chinese Chamber of Commerce in the Nigerian capital. The Chinese supermarket has been accused of racism by denying entry to African shoppers. After videos of the supermarket's blatant racism against local Nigerians went viral, the West African nation's consumer protection watchdog closed down the Chinese store. Officials of Nigeria's Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission locked down the Chinese supermarket until further notice. They also summoned the store's owner for investigation. So how did this instance of Chinese racism against Nigerians in their own country surface? It all started earlier this week. A group of Nigerians went to the Chinese Chamber of Commerce to shop from its supermarket. They were all stopped at the entrance by guards who said that people of only Chinese descent were allowed inside. And then the outcry began. Nigerian authorities have refused to reopen the Chinese supermarket. However, the racist attitude by Chinese towards Nigerians and Africans is nothing new. Reports highlight that Chinese social media is full of anti-African content. And despite calls for controlling racism on Chinese social media, Beijing has done almost nothing about it. Chinese racism came into spotlight even before the COVID-19 pandemic. Africans who were living in China became victims of Chinese racism repeatedly. Over the years, reports of Africans being treated unfairly by the Chinese have become far too frequent. It reached a point where governments had to intervene to douse the flames. And instead of facing the crisis, Beijing called the racism incidents a way to create animosity between China and Africa.
I want to say that if there are people who want to seize on an incident to exaggerate matters and sow discord in China's relations with African countries, that this is a doomed, futile effort. China and Africa have weathered many storms, and the cooperation has been successful and win-win. How relations are between China and Africa, and whether or not cooperation is good, African countries and the people of Africa know in their hearts exactly how things stand.
China's presence in Africa, particularly in Nigeria, remains massive. There are at least 10,000 Chinese living in Nigeria. And Beijing is credited for opening major ports and infrastructure projects in Abuja. However, China has openly engaged in arm twisting and discrimination against locals. And the most recent example is of the Chinese supermarket. As calls for boycott grow in Nigeria, it looks like Chinese racism has become a setback for Beijing's relations with Africa.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.